With BSG adding new parts for the G36, the AUG and the SCAR, today we're going to take a look through a few different 5.56 weapons to see what has changed and whether some are better than any of the others. So let's get started with the G36. And you can see we've got the C here on Peacekeeper 2, and nothing has changed about where you buy these things, so we're just going to edit the build and see what BSG have actually added to this gun. So overall, it doesn't actually seem to be that complicated. I'm going to remove the front sight, and we're going to get rid of the barrel as well, because there are only 3, they haven't added any more there. So when we look at the handguards, the old G36 ones were the 2-vent, the 4-vent, and the 6-vent. Now they've added 2 more. We have this one, the G36 Slimline, which is the Slimline H-key handguard, and then we also have the Knight's Armor one. This is the KAC quad rail handguard. So these 2 are the new ones, and they've got a rail underneath, as you can see. And the main difference between them is that the quad rail is slightly better for recoil, and this one is better for ergonomics. We're talking 2.5% recoil reduction on the quad rail, and on the slimline we've got -2%, and this one has 2 more ergonomics with 10 versus 8 for the other. Given that you only gain half a point of recoil, I actually think that the Slimline H-key is probably better because the ratio is like 4-to-1 ergo points to recoil. It's a small number, so it doesn't matter that much, but I think on balance this one's probably better. Also, it's a little bit lighter too, which also does help with things like ADS speed. So we're going to add on this H-key handguard to start with. And the difference is now you can only use the long and medium length barrel. You can't actually use the short barrel for it. So we're going to choose one of these 2, and it really is up to you. And the difference isn't actually that stark between these on the G36. So you're trading 1 recoil for 4 ergonomics. I personally would tend to go for the medium length barrel in that case, because again, this is like a 1-to-4 trade-off, and I think that the ergonomics is probably worth a little bit more. We're going to add on the gas block because there is only 1. In terms of grips, one cool thing is that this can use the CQR because it's got a nice long rail that the CQR can attach to. So if you do want to reduce the recoil here, then go for that. I'm usually quite partial to going for a bit more of a ergo balance. As you can see here, this gets you 64.5 and 74 at this point. But if we change over to something like the SE5, that's going to remove 1 more recoil and then give you another 4 ergo. So another 1-to-4 choice, which I probably will make. We'll talk about muzzles in a moment, and the other thing that has changed on the G36 is the stock. So this is the basic stock, and you used to be able to attach this one, which is the KV. This one was slightly better for recoil, but quite a bit worse on ergonomics. And also to mention, half a kilo heavier as well, which actually has another negative effect on kind of implied ergonomics when we're talking about Evo Ergo, which is the concept that is employed on Tarkov DB website when looking at overswing and that kind of thing. So usually I've ended up avoiding this. Now there are 2 new ones here. We've got this, which is the G36 Tommy built AR stock adapter. This, if you put that on, allows you to add any of these regular stocks. But the big problem with this guy is that currently it doesn't seem to be in the loot pool. There's no way to buy this, there's nowhere to buy it from, and it's not on the fleet. So I imagine that it's probably not in the loot pool. I don't think it's going to be banned. It doesn't seem like a part that would be banned on the fleet. That would be very unusual for it to be so. But no trader sells it, and no one's listing them up because I guess no one's found them yet. So I guess that this is just probably not in the game right now. If you were to apply it though and put an MOE on it, just so that we can have something for reference, this would get you to 70 and 70, something nice to be able to compare. The other one that is here is the G36 IDZ, the adjustable stock, this one. And do note there is a butt pad that you're able to apply to this. So I'm going to put that on, and there are 2 butt pads. There is one which is the concave version and one which is the convex version. One of them gives -1 recoil and +3 ergo. The other gives -3 recoil and +1 ergo. So it depends on which you want. In terms of the ratio, I actually think that -3 recoil, so this is a swing of 2, is worth losing the 2 ergo here, because we've been making 1-to-4 trades elsewhere for ergo, and here we're making a 1-to-1, which is a much better trade-off than elsewhere on the weapon. So I think I'm actually going to go for the convex butt pad in this particular case. And then after this, it's just the usual choices. For the G36, either the Mini Monster, so the SF3P and the Mini Monster, and that will take you to 62.5 ergonomics and 58 vertical recoil, which is very, very good. The alternative, if you want lower recoil than this, you should just try it out and see, is the G-Lock. So that will reduce the recoil by quite a lot, from 58 down to 53, but it'll also reduce your ergo as well. So you kind of want to play around with both of them to see which you prefer. And then you just add your sights and your tactical devices as you wish. So that's what's different about the G36. As usual with this, you probably want to remove the magazine, add on the G36 NATO magwell, and then you're allowed to use any of the magazines that would be compatible with the other 5.56 weapons, like the long 40 rounders, which are not usually a bad choice. Picking these high cap magazines and removing some of this extra ergo is often why I end up using the Mini Monster, because the ergo is so much higher. 45 here, and if we use the Mini Monster, it ends up being 57. So it's quite a big difference. So next, let's talk about the AUG. So the AUG has had some changes as well. We haven't gone through these yet on the channel, so we're going to do this today. We obviously have the original AUG A1, which is the one with the horrible sight here. You can't change that unless you use the A3 upper, where you need to be able to have Peacekeeper 3 anyway, and you may as well use the AUG A3 because it has better stats. But there's this new one as well, which is the same, which is the AUG A3 but in black. So this is a different line. This is a bit like the SCAR in Black vs Tan. It's its own gun, it's its own line of gun. So we're going to edit this one. It's the same thing, it's got the same base stats, but we're going to just have a look and see what has changed on this weapon. So previously the AUG could not change its vertical foregrip, but now you can add on this thing here, the Steyr AUG Corvus Defensio. Before we do that though, we're going to change over the entire upper. You used to be locked into either the A3 receiver or the A1. Now we can change over to this, the A3 Altor 556 receiver, which has got much better stats. If you look versus the AUG A3, here we're talking about ergonomics of +3 rather than -1, so that's a swing of 4, and recoil of -4 versus no benefit on this at all. So -4 recoil and +4 ergonomics as a swing, which is really, really good. So we're going to use that. Now, in terms of barrels, I think the trade-off here isn't worth it because unlike the G36, for the 20-inch versus the 16-inch, unless you're actually worried about barrel length, you're talking about a difference in 2% recoil for 4 ergonomics. So this is actually a 1-to-2 trade-off rather than a 1-to-4, which I think is still probably worthwhile using the 20-inch barrel. It's up to you. Try it out, see if you feel like it's too long, but because this is a bullpup anyway, it ends up actually feeling alright. It has high ergo to start with. This new upper is also compatible with this Corvus Defensio key mod, so we're going to put that on. And this then allows you to add this guy, which is the 6.8-inch rail section, which is the one for this particular handguard. And because it's so long, this is another one that allows you to add the CQR as well, which is interesting. A lot of these guns getting access to the CQR in 5.56. Does make the gun look a bit goofy, so it's kind of up to you whether you want to use it or not, but we'll stick it on just for the time being. This new upper also has its own rail mount, this one here, the Corvus Defensio Receiver Rail MOI 30 slots. As you can see, it's super long, so you're able to put on basically any ring mounted scopes you like outside of the 34 mils. I don't know why those aren't compatible. I think they probably should be, but apparently they're not, so whatever. And then from here, we have exactly the same choice as with the G36. I wouldn't use any of the proprietary AUG stuff. I would just use the Ratworks and then go for the standard brakes that we know and love, either the SF3P and the Mini Monster if you want to keep the ergo nice and high, or alternatively, you go for the G-Lock and the M4 SDK as per the G36. This is basically the same. You don't get the opportunity to swap the magwells over with the AUG, so you are stuck with the AUG magazines, but you can have a 42 rounder, which is 2 more than the regular 5.56 one, so that's pretty good. And this thing is only -7 ergo, so it's about in line with the others. This new upper has also got this little rail on here, so you can actually add a flashlight or laser, no problem up there. And as we said, you can just add whatever sight you like. This one also has the ability to add the Chris Defiance front and back if you want 1 extra ergonomics, which the G36 doesn't have. There is also the ability to add more rails and more parts up on the side. I don't know why you'd actually want to do this, but you can add these things on here if you want. If you want to add like a another tactical device or something down here or over on the right hand side, you can do that if you wish. So from here, which ones are actually good? Well, I've got a G36, I've also got an AUG, but I've got a SCAR L, which is modded exactly the same way as we did for the SCAR H recently, because they've both got interchangeable parts, and we've also taken a bleeding edge Meta M4 as well to compare all of them. Ended up adding the G-Locks to make it more comparable, and we started with the G36 before moving on to the AUG, then the M4, and then finally the SCAR to compare the spray patterns of all of them. The first thing that you'll probably notice is that the SCAR has the lowest vertical recoil out of all of the guns, even including the Meta M4. But this makes sense because the weapon only has 650 RPM. Then you really have a toss-up between the G36 and the M4, and then finally the AUG in last place. What's really weird though is that when I went to the firing range to use the G36 and the AUG to actually compare them and try to control both the guns, I actually found the AUG easier to control than the G36, despite it looking like the spray pattern is higher on the wall. This could be because of a small difference in fire rate. We're going from 750 on the G36 down to 715 for the AUG, or it could also be because the sights on the AUG are so much closer to the user's face, which makes the reticle bigger, and I personally find that easier to use. That one is a personal preference thing though. I know some people like their sights to be nice and small. Most surprising of all though is that the M4 isn't head and shoulders above the rest of the guns when it comes to recoil. The recoil pattern between them is all fairly comparable, especially compared to the way it used to be before the recoil rework. One of the starkest differences between them, which does make the M4 actually better than the others, is the ergonomics. So in the setup that we've got here, the ergo on the M4 is way higher than it is on all of the other guns, with the SCAR in last place and the G36 and the AUG somewhere in the middle. This makes for an interesting piece of weapon balance within 5.56. If you use the M4, you kind of get a bit of everything. You get decent, although not the very best in terms of recoil profile, but you get time to kill because of 800 RPM. With the SCAR, you have low ergonomics, which does make it annoying to ADS, but once you're firing, it's very, very stable, and you have a long time to shoot because the RPM is that little bit lower. Often people don't really like that with intermediate caliber bullets because they are typically lower damage and lower pen, but for some people that may work. The G36 to me seems very similar in comparison to the M4, although with slightly slower ADS speed, and the AUG is somewhat of a blend with this special feature of having the sight closer to your face. This doesn't happen with LPVOs though. I tested that and they all look the same on all 4 of the guns. So normally with these kind of videos, I'd show you a few clips, but with the zombie event going on, it's just not been a good time to use 5.56, and when I did try to use it, I literally didn't get to fire my weapon except for one fight and got killed instantly by every single person that I met without even seeing them. So sometimes that's just life, and that's Tarkov. So until next time, as always, a big shout out to all my patrons, and as usual, have fun in your raids.